Welcome back to Recharge. We're here with another coaching tip for you. Today, focusing on the squat. Now, during this pandemic, everybody is increasing the amount of body weight and at-home programming and workouts they're doing, which we love to see. But as physical therapists, we're also cognizant of when you add a ton of volume, a ton of speed, and a ton of reps on to a movement you might not have done a lot of, we're always a little bit cautious. And we want to give you this coaching tip to help you do this first before you start cranking out hundreds of air squats or lunges that you really haven't got into before. So it's a relative three-step process, right? The first two being major principles and the third one being actionable, so capitalize on those principles. The first principle is one that we preach all the time here, in that a squat is unique to you. What feels most natural to you? If you feel like you can just drop down into the position, that's probably right. But if you go to squat down because someone's saying you need to squat a certain way and all you feel is pinchiness in your hips, it's not the right technique for you. So principle number one is find the unique squat stance to you and your body alone. Number two then we're looking at is what we call like the angles of our torso versus our shin. So I'll kind of mimic this and pause for a second so you can even see these drawn in. When I'm here, what I consider is the angle from my ankle to my knee. So I look at that line, and then I consider the angle from my hip up to my shoulder. As we squat down, we want to think those two lines should stay as parallel as possible to each other, and that will allow me to happen. Now, I'll go the other way. If I go to squat down and I end up here, this angle runs right into this angle. This isn't necessarily a place we want to be for a squat. Usually people sacrifice those angles to get more depth in their squat. Here at Recharge, we're always promoting that it isn't necessarily the depth of your squat that we care about the most. It's the consistency of the depth of that squat with those angles. People oftentimes, when they hold and are accountable to those angles and are consistent with their depth wherever it is, they'll actually improve their depth better over time than trying to force it right away. So the actionables from those two principles then are a couple I have shown here that you can go through to help yourself feel the best possible air squat you can. Number one is always seeing if ankle mobility is potentially an issue, what we can do is actually put heel plates or some sort of wedge underneath your heels. So here at Recharge, we usually use these little 2.5-pound plates, and you can see my heel goes right on the edge of that plate, just like that, right? I'm not my whole middle of my foot. My toes should be relatively on the floor, and I should feel pretty stable here. Heel is on the plate, toes pressing down along those lines. As I go to squat down then, I'll notice that I actually get to stay more upright because I'm improving the angles because I have a little bit more ankle mobility, right? So that's the first action you can look at. If I put a little bit of wedge underneath my heels or even an insert underneath my heels, am I able to maintain those overall angles? And does it feel more natural to me, right? Over time, you can slowly take away those heel plates away and those wedges away, and you'll feel better because your body's able to get more accustomed to that. So let's say we don't think it's an ankle thing. What's the other thing you could try? Well, is it just more of a, we'll call it a neuromuscular or nervous system thing where everything's tight because it just hasn't done it a lot? So you plan to do 300 air squats, you can use this as kind of a trick for it. I often call this a counterweight or counterbalance, in which you can take a plate like this or really any weight that's 10 pounds or less, you hold it out in front of you, it creates a counterbalance, and then as you squat down, you can kind of own that position, those angles a little bit better, and play around in the bottom of that squat, and then come up slowly. Even using that as a warm-up can be a great way before you get to your squats, because for some people, it isn't a mobility restriction, it's just not having done the movement a lot. So a little bit of counterbalance can allow you to feel out and your body and nervous system to get used to that position. The last one we always like to use is potentially a target. Same sort of concept as the nervous system, just not having enough reps to understand where to go for depth. What you can do is you can use a chair, a bench, or really anything that gets you to the appropriate height. What we usually typically do is measure somebody by them squatting down to what they feel comfortable and then putting the target just at the edge of that. So for this, for example, I have it about here at the bench. I can use that right behind me, squat to that bench so my angles are appropriate, come back up, and that gives me something consistent to constantly hit. Right? So in summary for this coaching tip, if you're going to plan on doing a ton of squats, start with just this to make sure you do your due diligence ahead of time for that kind of physical therapy perspective. That starts with your squat stance is unique to you and only you. Number two, look at the angles of your torso versus your shin and try to keep those as parallel as possible. And number 3, use one of the outlined 3 strategies we have between the heel plates, a counterweight, or a target to make sure your squat feels as best you can. If you can own that position, feel comfortable there, that's when you can really start testing out those high capacity, high volume air squat workouts that everybody's trying to do nowadays. There's your recharge coaching tip. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to us on our YouTube channel or reach out to us at any of our social media sites or look at any of our previous videos that we might have on these various topics.